Hey Derek, let's take a look at this week 6 final project that you've got in here. The image, the drawing has turned out really nice in a lot of areas. Obviously the detail has been increased by a huge amount from the last time that we saw it, and I think that the elements are mostly because of this detail increase. Are much clearer to understand. I think the mountain before, there were areas where it wasn't quite, you weren't quite sure what some things were that you were looking at, and other things tended to be, I think, maybe a little bit too basic. The castle especially, I think, really running into that. I think what you have here now is much clearer. It's easier to understand. I think the detail really benefits the castle, which I think ends up looking very impressive. Not just from the detail standpoint, but the color and the way that you're integrating the color from the sky into it. It feels highly reflective because of the way that it's just kind of incorporating the colors that are going on, around it. The color in general is very good. I thought you did a great job of kind of working within a color palette that's very, it's wide. There's a lot of variety going on in it, but it still kind of maintains a sense of realism to it. The trees have a nice amount of variation in their kind of organic greens and browns, and it's nice to see how things get a little bit darker and a little less detailed as they move further and further back into space, which is good. The mountain itself, also detail-wise, looking very impressive. A lot of good shading going on and some really excellent just kind of drawing going into it. I do think from this transition from what I think before was a little more of an unclear kind of mountain situation is one where the mountain to me doesn't really feel like it exists anymore. And I'm not sure if that was meant to be or not. I don't get the feeling that this is like a structure that's come out of a land formation that was there before, but it feels almost entirely kind of man-made. And you don't quite get the sense that the castle and the skull kind of incorporate within the landscape as much as what I think we saw before. I think it has its benefits, the main one being that it is clearer to understand what's going on, but you don't quite get that inclusion as I think what you did before. I think the path, that kind of wound around and kind of went up into it kind of helped a little bit as well, but I really think it ended up being more, I think maybe it was wider. It kind of built up to the point a little bit more gradually than here, which is just kind of a straight up skull that feels like it's being rendered with I think a slight amount of stone in mind. I think it also feels a little bit isolated from the environment in a few other ways. I think that the castle does a great job of incorporating the environmental lighting, but the skull itself doesn't feel like it quite does that. Although I'm kind of imagining like the sun is starting to go down in between these two mountains, and I almost feel like that's what's kind of reflecting through with the eyes, which is, I think, really interesting. Whether I'm kind of making that up or it's purposeful or not, it is what it is, but I find that kind of really intriguing. But I mean, there's a real lack of kind of cast shadows that are occurring within it. The change themselves, I really think we would see some cast shadows occurring from it. I think there would be some stronger cast shadows that are coming towards the viewer since the sun is behind it. And I also think there'd be a little bit more kind of environmental lighting, a little bit more of these oranges and blues being incorporated along the edges, especially the periphery where it would be catching a lot of that kind of colored lighting. Texturally, it's great. I think in terms of just kind of straight up marker usage, it feels very non-marker like. I don't notice, a lot of streaking. The blind really only shows itself in a few areas, and there's a lot of integration of color, which is not something you see a whole lot of with markers. So I think it ends up feeling more like a painting and a drawing more than a marker rendering, which I think is probably one of the better comments you could get from that.